Marky Worthington Podcast all day.
All day.
Dream by night.
Don't buy me a drink. Just give me $10.
Oh, dude, you look sweet. Yeah, you got a big beard, dude.
Go down to the strip club with your floppy disk and turn it into a hard drive.
Yeah, right. Thrown out by Big Tony.
We're here to name names and make people feel more ashamed for shit that they're not proud of.
Me and my best friend, Marky Worthington.
Oh, whatever it is.
Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the Marky Worthington Comedy Podcast. This is episode 115. And it's a callback episode. It's the part one of the Greg Kimball episodes. This is originally released as episode 9, and it was released on the 6th of January 2020, recorded at the end of 2019. It was a really good episode. It was cool to listen back to now, like 5 years later. 4 years later, but it was early on in comedy, and we're chatting about Stanhope and our discovery of Stanhope and how it fit into our comedy timeline. So that was good because, in hindsight, after seeing Stanhope, opening for Stanhope, and watching a lot more of his content, it was good to see where it all started. We chatted about one of Canberra's live podcasts that no longer runs, but sort of like paved the way for the Canberra podcasts and comedy vibe, as well as the establishment of the Canberra comedy scene in the early days of that. Greg was talking about going to the front when it'd only sort of been running for like 6 or 12 months. And also emceeing music gigs. Greg's got like a horror story in this episode of when he emceed a music gig. I've emceed a few of them since we recorded this episode, so I kind of know how quickly they can turn on you if you're not careful. But yeah, it was good to hear his horror story, because we've all got one at some point. Someone's just like, "Oh yeah, can you MC my music gig? It'd be really cool if we had a comedian in between bands," and then you get there and end up getting fucking stitched up most of the time. But yeah, cheers everyone for listening to this one. I like doing these little intros, listening back to the callback episodes. It means that I can sort of re-release material that people may not have heard yet, and I think that it's also good for me to listen back to these old episodes. Like, for example, in this one, I was saying, I don't have any bad habits of looking at my phone or writing my jokes on my hands, and that was 4 years ago. And now I pretty much always look at my phone. It's become a bad habit. So it was good to see how, I was Mr. Comedy 4 years ago talking about how I'm, not looking at my phone, and now that's bloody slipped. But, yeah, I like doing these ones. Someone even suggested that maybe I could do some solo ones, so I'm thinking maybe I could do some of these intros a bit longer before the shorter ones. This is just a half an hour one because it's a two-parter. So yeah, I guess it's good to do both, but either way, I'm sort of trailing on a little bit because I'm thinking as I go that I'd like to do a bit more of these solo episodes, maybe some chat at the start of the episodes where I'm listening, watching, reading some emails or anything like that. So yeah, let me know what you think. Flick me an email, flick me a message on Instagram if you want me to talk about stuff at the top of these callback episodes. Send it through to my website, markycomedy.com. There's a contact form on there. Fill that out if you want to send anything through. If you're listening to this on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or whatever, wherever you listen to it, Spotify, rate the podcast. It helps get me up in the algorithm. Any 5-star reviews, whatever you write in the description, I'll read on the show. So it doesn't matter what you write. If it's 5 stars, I'll read it. That's opening up the floodgates to some interesting review comments. But anyway, yeah, share it with your friends, whatever you need to do. But yeah, hope you enjoy the episode. Peace.
Callback episode.
A good callback.
Callback.
Hello and welcome to the Marky Worthington Comedy Podcast. This is episode 9, and kicking off the new year with our first guest, Greg Kimball.
Hey Marky, how you going, mate?
Hey, good to have you here, man. First guest for the year, 2020. We're recording this before that, but hey, it's good to have you on the show.
It's good that you broke down the fourth wall immediately at the start of the podcast.
Absolutely.
No one would have known, but you're just too honest.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of podcasting. We could have recorded this well before that. I like to call them, this is Doug Stanhope's term, evergreen episodes. So, like, they'll have episodes which they'll record as placeholders. Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Doug Stanhope's. I saw him live when he came to Canberra.
Yep.
And I found him quite late into my comedy kind of life. And he's just a phenomenon, isn't he?
Oh, man.
The story he talks about where his mother is dying
Yeah.
and they help her suicide is... I try and describe it to people who haven't heard of him or haven't heard that bit, and trying to describe how it's so brutal but so heartwarming at the same time is really hard to do, but it's a phenomenal bit.
Man, I think the reason that he gets away with it in such a way that I've never been able to get away with when I try and tell my friends. Like, I use that bit whenever I try to convince people to come to a Stanhope show. But I'm glad I went and seen him when he was here last, so I had more material to tell other people. But he paints the picture of the relationship between him and his mum. And then you're like, all right, that makes sense. Like, he has a line in there where he's just like, so... Apparently it was going to take like 50 morphine. She had 90. Hoarded till the day she died. And it just has lines like that where you're like, man. But also his stage presence and persona.
Oh, it's got a lot to do with being in comedy for 24 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Like you know your way around a story and your own personality and your style.
Yeah.
Especially as someone like he is, who's so committed to his persona. It is just purely him and his way of thinking. And you know, no one else is going to be able to do a story like that. You know?
Yeah. He is so natural on stage because he lives his stage persona.
Yeah, totally.
Like, it's not like, I know that with some people they are kind of a little bit more sheepish in real life, whereas he seems to be, just from listening to podcasts, and I've never had the chance to meet him. Actually, Phil Carruthers opened for him.
That was the show I saw.
Yeah, so Bill and I were there.
Yeah.
And I wore my vintage suit, you know. I was,
nice.
I had to take something there that he could sign if I seen him at a drop of a hat.
Yep.
Because I just didn't want to take up any of his time more than I needed to, just to him to scribble on something. But dude, he signs all his merch still. Like, when if you order from his store, he signs stuff for you. I got both of his books, signed copies, things like that. So like, that's another good point, is no matter his level, he still puts in that effort to his fans. Yeah, that's why he has a really devoted fan base as well. Yeah. But so that's a Stanhope like term, and then we just go into a whole fanboy about Stanhope.
Yeah. So we just hijacked the intro of your podcast.
Yeah. No, man, but it's good to have you on. I think in the early days of me starting this up, I did actually have words with you, I think, at Phoenix, which has since shut down, about, you know, potentially being on the show. So it's good to see it finally like come into tuition.
Yeah, man. No, look, you know, I'm always happy to do things like this. It's good fun, even just sitting down shooting the shit.
Yeah, and you said that you've been on podcasts before with A Beer and a Shot, which is another Canberra comedy podcast.
Yeah, Shot and a Beer.
Shot and a Beer,
that's right, yeah, the Bensley brothers. I think they're still around. They haven't been doing any more podcasts recently.
Yep.
Andrew's in Sydney and Danny's down in Melbourne. But but they're still floating around doing stuff, those boys. And their podcasts, they also did as a live show.
Yeah.
And I was on that a few times.
Yeah, right.
Which
what would that usually be?
So the format for that was the guest of the podcast would kind of, it was like a mini headline show in the first act. So you'd have the boys would sort of co-host.
Yep.
And then you'd have maybe 1 or 2 support acts, and then the guest on the podcast would do about 20.
Yeah.
And then they'll go and have a break. So that's an hour-ish.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they'll have a break, and then the second half is just the live recording of the podcast with that guest.
Yeah, right.
And those two are just, I'm going to fanboy on the Bensleys now. Those two are just phenomenal in terms of how they can bounce off each other. And I mean, that's from being brothers their whole life. You talk about,
man.
Stanhope knowing his stuff. I mean, those guys have been doing that their whole lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's something really nice, and they know each other's sense of humour so well that they're just so natural in playing off each other, and I get along with them really well. They're both really good mates of mine, and so it was a really fun podcast to do.
Yeah, cool.
A really good mate of mine, Jez Margosis, who is still doing comedy, but he's actually a fight MC. He's a mixed martial arts fight MC.
Going down the Joe Rogan route.
Yeah, and he does jiu-jitsu and stuff himself. But he does a lot of I think he's done a couple of UFC sort of prelims and things like that. And when he was doing more stand-up, used to have a podcast as well, and so I did a fair few of those. With
cool.
Him. So that was good fun as well.
Yeah, right. No, it's good to know that you've been on a couple before. I sort of came in at the tail end of Beer and a Shot. Like I didn't see any of the live shows. That was about when I first started in comedy.
Yeah.
But I've caught both Danny and
Drew. Yep.
Sorry. At multiple shows around town. I think I know Danny better just because he MC'd a few of the nights. Actually, I think Danny MC'd my second ever open mic at the Front.
Yeah, right.
And which is now back up and running again, which is really cool. It was a good room too.
The Front's killing it, and that was actually my first genuine comedy gig that I ever did.
Yeah,
was at the Front in Lyneham on a Tuesday night. It's on a Friday now, but there was something, and I didn't realise at the time when that was happening that we were talking before we started recording about sort of when I came into the scene, but I felt at the time, and this was in 2009, that the scene had been running for quite a long time and that I was sort of just entering it. But what I realised in the years after was that it had only been going for maybe 6 or 12 months, and that it was all relatively new. And the Front and the Civic Pub were really the two kind of continuing or growing sort of rooms that were happening in Canberra that are still around today and are still killing, and they're still the two best rooms in my opinion, or at least the most consistent, long running kind of rooms. That
well, there's some value in the history. So until you build history of the room, which is what I'm trying to do with the basement, you get that feel.
Yeah, I just realised how much of a shit comment that was to make while I'm sitting in another open mic room.
No.
Other than your room, Marky.
No, man, look, like, I know what you mean, like, because, like I said, you need history with a room. And I'm starting to build it here. I mean, I've got plans for next year and a couple of, plans for 2020 with some of the setups. Like tonight I've got you in to MC the first half, which is something that a format I'd like to do more often. Have an MC. I had Benny Egmalees last time, and he killed it with the MC skills. He's really quick on the MC, riffing on the crowd and with the crowd, and doing callbacks to the last comedian set and things.
Benny Eggs is a legend. He's so good at just being natural and responsive to what's happening around him.
Yep.
I can, sometimes you never really know what is written with him and what's just sort of coming up in his head as he's off the cuff as he's on stage, and he's just such a great guy to listen to speak. He's great. I think he just went up to Tamworth and up North Coast and places like that. So
he travels with it, which is cool. And I think with a lot of the, whether you don't know, you mentioned you don't know sometimes whether it's written or whether it's off the cuff. I think sometimes I'll have material. I'm getting to the point now, so I've just been doing comedy for just over 2 years now, and I have a lot of material that isn't polished, and it might just take an audience member to say something that'll remind me, or a previous bit that'll remind me of something, like a previous comedian if I MC or whatever, or even just the person before me. And I'll be like, all right, I'm doing that now. Like, I might have a 5-minute set for an open mic, and then the previous comedian will bring up something that I'm like, oh, there's that joke, that's how I can deliver it. And it'll all just come together. I'll go, all right, I'll pull this joke, throw that one in instead. I've rewritten my set like a few minutes before I'm even on the stage, and then just retry again. Yeah. And then it works. Like, I've had jokes that have just never worked. I've tried them a couple of times, didn't work. Then I put them after another joke, add them to a different one, something like that, and then all of a sudden it just clicks.
I find it hard to throw anything out, even though I reckon, 90% of what I write is junk. But, like, I find it really hard to throw out.
I'm a joke hoarder. Like
you might be going through a set or have an idea or a chunk of material later on where you've got this weird idea that suddenly fits. And so, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's a really good way to go about it, is the more you hone and the more you revise and review and rewrite your material, the more those other ideas will start to kind of churn in as well. But yeah, and look, I think that the skill of being on stage has got to be as much about the writing as it is about the stagecraft and about your ability to react and sort of listen to what's going on around you and listen to what the crowd's giving you back. The response you're getting and being able to kind of respond to that, even if you're not getting a necessarily hugely positive one, even acknowledging that to them can change their attitude towards you. And suddenly they kind of say, well, at least he's listening. At least he's kind of, he's getting in tune with us. And, I think when you see people who have their jokes written and delivered in that rote kind of standard fashion where they're just going to go power through every line, I think you're less likely to get a really good response from a crowd as to whether you're delivering and then listening and then and
because you're less relatable then. Totally. Like if you address something that they've realized, like for example, if it's a smaller crowd, I know a few comedians have like a standard intro for like if there's a smaller crowd, like they'll be like, there's one comedian that has the like, well, I performed to 2,000 people last week, but like this will do.
Nice.
And like that just breaks that barrier of like I'm up on stage. Actually, talking about other comedians, I was listening to a podcast by a guy called Dean Delray, and he was saying like, well, don't shit on the people that rocked up.
Yeah,
like,
sure,
like
man.
You're mad at everyone else that isn't there.
Absolutely.
You've got the only people here that you can't be mad at.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I sometimes use a line. There's a few gigs around town. I was at the Boardwalk last week, and some of them, like the basement here, feels like an actual basement. So there's no windows or anything. So it's great. You can actually kind of turn the lights down and keep the lights on the stage high, but those sorts of places where it's a bar or a cafe, they've usually got big open windows, and I usually make the joke that it's really nice to see the crowd. I'm not used to seeing the disappointment on the faces this early in the night, but it's something that you can kind of acknowledge that you can see them too. And it sort of it invites them to actually get involved in what's happening.
Well, that happened to me at the last open mic here. I was doing a bit and one of my friends yelled out and I was just like, I can't see you, but I'll talk to you. Like, I can't see your face, but this is a good opportunity for me to talk. I accidentally stumbled on a line at the last front. Someone said that they were doing crowd work with the previous set. So I get up there and I like get to like a section in my set, and I legitimately just forgot the next joke. It's like I've done 4 out of 5 minutes, and I'm just like, I swear I had something for you right now. And then I'm like, which like, to be honest, it's like when you don't expect it. Like after a while, I thought that I wouldn't do that again. But for some reason, because I don't have any bad habits of like writing my set on my hand or anything like that, I can't. And like I don't use my phone or anything. Like I don't have any frame of reference.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, let's do some crowd work. And then like while I'm midway through the crowd work, I'm like, oh shit, that was the bit I was gonna tell. And then so I just had to cut the crowd work short, and I'm just like, actually, fuck crowd work. That's why. Like the only reason you do crowd work is because you forgot what you're gonna say, which means I'm not prepared to talk here, which means you guys shouldn't have to talk because I'm not ready to.
Yeah.
Like I shouldn't have to make you guys talk just because I'm not ready to do it.
I remember talking to Ronnie Chang about how, because he does his crowd works incredible.
Oh, it's an art. Like
and the way he described it was, I mean, he's so full of confidence from the start. So I mean, he has full confidence in his ability to come out and come up with something. But what he one of the reasons he has that confidence is that what he said is that he knows he's about to say something funny. He knows that in the next minute he's going to drop a punchline and everyone's going to laugh their ass off. So he's sort of not worried about not getting a laugh. So he's going to just go down this little rabbit hole and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then if it makes something, great, he's got another laugh. If it continues, if he's able to build on it, great. But when he feels like it's run its course, then he just goes into the bit that he was about to.
Yeah.
And it's a really good way to do it, and I think I wouldn't say crowd work's one of my, it's not one of my sort of strongest points. I think people like Tom Gibson is phenomenal in the Canberra scene in terms of
great
crowd work. I saw him at the Club Sandwich in Tuggeranong, which is a great room, and another room where I did one of my first gigs. Chris Ryan's running that now. And they just had some tech issues. They just, for whatever reason, the mic wasn't working. I'm sure they've fixed all that now. I probably shouldn't shit can other rooms in terms of their technical quality.
I mean, sometimes people just knock it around. The person before you slaps it up.
But Tom just kept coming up with jokes that he was just filling in and just kept finding another punchline and another punchline and another punchline. You could see he was getting frustrated with wanting to do the shit that he'd come here to do.
Yeah.
But he was just able to keep the crowd going and then making a joke out of that situation, making a joke out of his own frustration, and that was a real skill. I think, I mean, it's just one of those things, the ability to make a connection between, or about something that's happening at the time is something that shows real kind of craft.
Dude, like, I had some mic issues here one week, and one of the guys, I've only ever seen him at Irish Club, and he came here. Dude can sing like country music, like Elvis and stuff as well, just mixes it up. And I was just like, can you test the mic? He just started singing.
Yeah.
Until I got the mic working. So I was like, dude, that's a good intro to a show. Just the dude comes up, starts singing a song, the mic fades in.
So was he a comic?
Yeah, his name's he's it just goes by his stage name Tony. But
okay. I don't think.
Yeah, but he just tells pub jokes, man. Yeah. Like he just comes up, tells pub jokes, just actually does quite good with his like I've seen him a couple of times both here and down at Irish Club. Mm-hmm. And just he sits back, he usually goes up like within the last 3 comedians, and he's happy to chill and do that one. Yeah, but he just started singing, man. It's just like, because this is a dynamic that I heard about. There was more of like a 70s thing, but comedy and music used to be heavily linked. A lot of the time, comedians would open for a rock band. And that's that whole like prior era, like even Robin Williams did it as well. Like it was all that the rock and roll and the comedy scene was in LA was just like meshed together. And I've been asked to MC a gig.
I've done that once, and I have to say it was probably one of the worst gigs that I've ever done in my life. I'll tell you the story. So, and I'll give my mate's band a bit of a shout out. It's a Canberra band called Lavers, and Dom Lavers and his brother Seb. I can't remember the other dudes' names. They might have changed by now anyway.
Yeah.
And I used to work with Dom. He's a great mate of mine, and they're fantastic blokes, and they make really good music. Anyway, they had this idea. They said, "Oh, look, they were doing a gig at the ANU refectory, and they said, do you want to MC?" And I was, yeah, sure. Whatever, a gig's a gig.
Yeah.
And the thing was, they wanted me to open up, so at the beginning, and then they wanted me to introduce those 2 support bands. So they wanted me to do, before the first support band, in between them, introduce the second support band, and then in between them and bring on the main act.
Yeah.
And so, as with most sort of headline gigs, 95% of the people are there for the headline act, right?
Yeah.
So no one is literally going to be in the band room for the first act. And so I didn't even get on stage. They just got on stage and started playing. They were like, "Look, we're running late. We're going to play."
Yeah, let's just do it. Yeah.
And so after after they finished, there's about a handful of people in there, and I started to try and do some crowd work and sort of chatting away and stuff like that. And I was trying to encourage people to come closer to the stage, and I was trying to make a joke about how there's nothing wrong with this part of the stage, right?
Yep.
So you're not going to catch anything, that kind of dumb joke.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And just before I got on stage, I had just finished talking to someone about my dad, who at the time was undergoing treatment for terminal cancer.
Right.
And so I was on stage and I'm going, trying to make this joke in my head. And I'm like, "It's okay, guys. You can come over to this part of the stage. It doesn't have cancer." And then as soon as I delivered that punchline, I looked straight at my mate's mum, the guy's band it was, his mum, who had beaten breast cancer.
Yep.
And then I realised that she didn't have a partner with her husband, because he died of cancer. So I've just made a cancer joke about the band and their family who had large amounts of cancer.
Right, yeah.
So that just went so bad already, right?
Yeah.
And so I was apologising to them. I'm like, "Oh my God, I feel so bad. This is like horrific." And they were like, "Man, it's fine. You're doing your thing. You just, don't worry about it. It's fine." She was cool. She was a total legend about it.
Yep.
So anyway, the second band comes on and they do their thing, and then I get up, and by that stage, so the people had started to come in, and by the intermission between the second and the main act, everyone's in there, and they've all been drinking, so everyone's just fucking, off their face. And I had this thing where I was going to come out and I was going to tell a couple of stories about my mate Dom, and I was going to do this little bit that I'd written. And
you're reading your notes before.
Oh
you go
yeah.
up there
And I mean,
shit,
I've been to rock concerts before.
Yeah.
And when you do a comedy show, people listen to the comedian, right?
Yeah.
Whereas at the rock show, they don't give a fuck about some guys on stage. And they literally just started yelling over me, and I'm like bringing the band out one by one, and they're just like, "Get off," like booing me off the stage. Someone chucked a beer at me, and a beer hit me, and I like flicked it back, and it's hit some chick in the face. And then it's just like, in the end, I'm just like, "Oh fuck!" Like I've just got to go. And so I got off stage.
Blues Brothers shit.
Yeah, literally, like they just hated me. And then they did their thing. And one thing that I'd said to them before is, I said to Dom, I've got this big, stupid green, like a green sort of onesie suit.
Yeah.
A frog suit.
Yeah.
And I wore it to a Christmas party years back. And I said, "Oh, maybe I can like jump in the frog suit and dance around on stage with you guys." And he asked the band, and they were like, "Yeah, whatever, like that's fine." Like, and after having bombed so hard, I was like, "I don't know whether I should. I don't know. This is like a dumb. I don't, And then one of the roadies is just like, "No, man, fuck it, just do it." And I'm like, "All right, I will." So I jump around on stage, and I don't even know if people knew it was me or not. And then I was tempted to like jump out into the crowd and like crowd surf, but I just thought everyone would just get out of the way. And
it'd be like School of Rock.
Yeah. And so I went down into the crowd, and I was running around in the crowd like dancing in the mosh and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And people still just hated me. Like I was just getting
couldn't.
Yeah, I was just copping
win.
elbows and just getting hooked from behind and stuff like that. But I was just trying to stay in character. Like I was just trying to be this sort of, life of the party kind of dude.
Yeah.
And but it's the same when you're on stage. But when you're doing any kind of a bit or a character or whatever, you just sort of get swept up in it. And I was just trying to embrace the crowd and being, that guy in the crowd. And at some point, and I'm not proud of this, I went past this woman, and I think I pinched her on the bum, or I slapped her on the bum, which is off. Like, you know, I feel really bad about it now, and it was a shit thing to do. But I didn't remember doing it. Like, at the time, I was sort of like, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, Monday morning comes, and I see Dom at work, and he goes, and I go, hey, mate, when's our next gig? You know, when are we doing this again? And he's like, yeah, you know, you know, it was really, thanks for doing it, man. Yeah, it was, yeah. It's so non-committal, absolutely non-committal about me ever having anything to do with their band ever again. And then I was like, oh, look, you know, but the frog suit seemed to go okay, didn't it? And he goes, look, you know, most people didn't mind that, but there was one lady who got really mad, and she said the guy in the frog suit, like, slapped her on the ass, and her husband was going to punch me out. Like, she said that if I hadn't kept walking, that would have been like the end she of it. Was going to, like, he had started, and he was going to grab me and fucking knock me out. Shit. And I just was like, oh god. So I made a cancer joke about the guy's band, the guy in the band's mum. I get booed off stage and accused of sexual harassment. I think that's an all-time bad gig.
Dude, like, that's 3 for 3.
Thanks, man. I don't think... when I say accused, like, I was quite guilty.
But
no, that was the only time I've ever done the comedian at a band.
Yeah.
You know, it's just rough, man.
Dude, I always look at people that take a guitar on stage.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're lucky with the fact that you have something to fill the noise when there's nothing.
Yeah.
Like, if I say a joke that doesn't hit, I have to bathe in the silence. Whereas if I've got a guitar, I can just strum at that motherfucker until people don't hear the laughter.
Similar to what you were talking about before with when you forgot your place and so you decided to do crowd work as a filler, which I meant to say before is the best thing you could have done.
Yeah.
The worst thing you could have done is gone, oh, fuck, I forgot what I was going to say. What am I going to say? Like, you just got to take a breath and just look around and just pretend like you're just having a breather.
Yeah.
And then if you still can't get it, you go in to ask a question, whatever. But the other thing is... being able to sit in silence is one of the things that I am in absolute awe with some comedians. I reckon Anthony Tomic is really good at that. He just always seems so cool.
Yep.
He never seems to be flustered or in trouble with where he's at in his head. And it's just one of those things that if you're able to exude a level of calm on stage and control of your own kind of emotions, I think it instills a bit of confidence in the crowd, and they go, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He's not fast. He's pretty nonplussed. It's all, you know, sweet. Yeah. So I think that's a real thing that I have to continually remind myself of as well, is that you don't necessarily have to have constant laughter. It's nice, but I mean, if there's periods where you just need to kind of take a beat, then that's all right. Like, I have to kind of, it's okay, this isn't going downhill, you know, and then kind of getting into your next bit.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything. I think it's really natural for there to be gaps of quiet. You just don't want it to be too long.
Yeah. Dude. Like it sometimes happens with, like, I know Taylor Kofter is good at that, and in fact, some of his jokes rely on silence to build up to a punch.
James McMahon has and I've seen him do comedy since he was 16 years old. I don't know how old he's now, 22, 23, something like that.
Yeah. Still young.
And it's still going. And as a 16, 17-year-old, had this confidence and this really absurd shit that he would do as well. Yeah. But had this ability to just sit and live in that silence and be absolutely unfazed by it. He was really... I've admired that about what he's done.
Yeah.
Like, the whole time he's ever been doing comedy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so much of a psycho. I just need constant validation. And if I don't get it, it's everyone else's fault aside from mine.
It's funny, man. I remember seeing an open mic in Sydney. Oh, this is way before I did comedy, so it must have been 20 years ago now. But I was interested in it at the time, so I used to go to a fair few mics and different things around the place. And there was a dude who came out, And he did his first couple of jokes, and there was a lady who was in the crowd, and she had some people with her, and the dude didn't know that she was actually getting up later, but she was drinking, she was obviously trying to get her confidence up, and she was a really loud laugher. Now, this dude drops his first couple of jokes, and she laughs really loud. It's a decent joke, right? And he's like, "What's with your laugh, lady?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Oh, what do you laugh so loud?" And she was like, "Oh, sorry, I thought it was stand-up comedy," which is a pretty good line.
That's good.
And she got a massive laugh from
that, yeah.
You know? And then he was like, "Oh, well, just don't do it so loud." So you've just told your audience at a comedy show not to laugh loud. Like, what kind of fucking idiot are you?
Yeah.
And then they went, "All right." And everyone just didn't laugh. For the rest of his set, they just gave him
It's
fucking
so
nothing.
funny how quickly a crowd can turn on you.
Yeah. And they did. They just turned on him. And in the end, he was just like, "All right." And so, I mean, that's one of those things I always try and keep in mind. I think it's a fine line with crowd work and hecklers as well.
Yep.
Sometimes there's a big difference between doing crowd work and hecklers. So sometimes you might have people who go into the crowd to get a response or to set up a joke or whatever, and then later on the crowd doesn't necessarily know the difference, and so they might think, "Oh, I can contribute here as well."
True.
And then they'll say something, and then the comic could be like, "Shut the fuck up."
Yeah. No, I've heard of that.
You can't ask for it in 1 minute and then get angry when they provide the same kind of
feedback
contribution later on. Yeah. So
I've heard that with comedians that take an opener.
Yeah.
So the opener might invite the crowd to be involved, and then the headliner just has to deal with people wanting to talk the whole time to him.
Yeah.
It's the same with open mics, man. If you get an MC that does a bit of crowd work and then he brings you up, it's just like, fucking thanks, dude. I didn't want these people talking to me.
Yeah.
But that's why I like mixing up the MC.
Yeah.
Because it makes you work in different conditions.
Yeah.
You can't just go into the same safe space every time, because even that's not going to be funny after a while.
Yeah.
Even if you could, if I got up and did a killer set, and then went back the next week and did the same set, same venue, maybe even mostly the same crowd, it's not going to hit the same. Even if it's a different crowd, no two people the same, it could still not hit as good. Probably won't hit as good, because do you know why? The first time you didn't expect it to kill. The second time you expected it to, and now it's done. Have you ever seen someone that just nails a joke and it gets down pat, and then you can see when they get sick of doing it because they stop getting as many laughs for it? I've done it myself.
They don't deliver it with the same kind of passion or
exactly,
conviction.
because I did this joke one time, so I won't tell a whole joke, it's just a tag at the end of one. So I'll sometimes be telling a joke and I'll like chuckle midway through it. I'm like, "Oh, sorry, I haven't heard this one either."
Yeah, it's a nice line.
So I'll be doing it for the first time on stage, and I'm writing it sometimes as I'm saying it.
Yeah.
I'll go up with a skeleton of how I want, set up, punch. But then there'll be set up, someone says something, address that, think of something else, say that, and then before you know it, you're set up, tangent, punch. Just like your buddy was saying, with the crowd work. But I've got some more stories about traveling and doing comedy around the place. I'm going to split this episode in 2 halves.
We've been talking that long already.
So I've got ADD, bro, so I can't edit for more than half an hour. So I'm going to cut this now, and then we'll come back and do the second part after this one. And for you guys, it's going to feel like a few weeks. So
sick.
All right. Thanks for listening to the first part. Make sure you tune into the second part coming soon. And make sure you like, subscribe, and share, comment, and rate the podcast.
Don't buy me a drink.
Just name names.
Yes,
right.
Big Tony. You'll get fucking thrown out of the strip club with your floppy disk.
Yeah, you got a big beard, dude.
Shame for shit all day.
Me and my best friend, Marky Worthington.
Keep it simple. Count your money.
That they're not proud of.
Just give me $10.
Hey, right.
Click.
Did you hang up?
No, I just said click.